Welcome to the Heartbeat Podcast with your host, Mike Sommer, where CIOs get what they won't hear anywhere else. Candid insights, real strategies, and the truth about leading tech in a world that's changing faster than ever.
Today's guest, John Ayers, is a leading voice in customer experience, AI-driven personalization, and digital business transformation. With a background in agency leadership, Salesforce, and service design, John specializes in mapping the customer and employee journey using AI, customer data platforms, and real-time interaction management. He's a key player in the Public Sapient AI Task Force, the Salesforce Partner Advisory Board, and founder of the Los Angeles Service Design Group, helping companies bridge technology and human-centered design. Today, we'll explore how CIOs can harness AI and data to create seamless, personalized customer experience. So let's dive in. John, thank you for joining.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me.
So John, why don't you walk us through how you got to where you are today? Do you have any key items or key things that really jump out as mile markers and things that are guiding steps that you could point to?
Yeah, just in fact, it's an interesting topic. And the reason I say that, I didn't design kind of the path that I've taken, but it's interesting looking back that I've really been kind of, because of where I entered the work world in time and in historical thinking, I entered when the personal computer was exploding and the Macintosh came out and desktop publishing was happening. And I was a very young, early 20-something doing desktop publishing when no one really knew what it was. And I saw kind of the disruption that I was having, or it was being done onto people. And then fast forward, I saw some of that being realized in advertising, the capabilities of technology in advertising. So I spent the first good part of my career in creative strategy and marketing and campaign development. I then got into the music industry. I was working for Warner Music Group for years, and it's right when MP3 file compression was happening. And this is like Napster came out before Apple iTunes. Push forward a few more years, and I find myself in the entertainment industry when the VHS was moving to DVD, to Blu-ray, to streaming at an accelerated pace. And then one more step, if you kind of continue through, I saw the same thing happening when I got hired by a university to run all their integrated marketing, and things like Khan Academy and Coursera and Udacity were coming into play. So if you look at that arc, every time I've kind of moved forward, I've noticed I've been around digital disruption. So when you think about where I started in traditional agency and kind of what I've observed and kind of where I've really been at the intersection of creative and technology, but also in digital disruption. So that's really kind of the path that I've taken, and that's kind of where you find me today.
Thank you for that. So in this blend of creativity and technology, is it something that came inherently to you, or was it more situational that you found yourself in that situation and you had to learn into it?
Yeah, kind of as I alluded to, I didn't have a grand plan. I'm not that smart, right? So like it kind of happened to me, right? And had I entered the workplace at a different point in history, I might have been in a different place. However, thinking about the market landscape, that's kind of what I did in advertising, always understanding demographics, always understanding kind of market conditions, what's interesting to the product and to the consumer, what our business is trying to do to interact with that customer they're trying to serve. And this is really in the early days of traditional advertising, traditional media, so outdoor, out of home, radio, television, print. And it's interesting because I saw early days of web development and then people going, oh, I'm going to buy an ad or I'm going to send an email. But I was kind of coming out of the old school of traditional agency world, creative. I was a creative director launching campaigns. So I saw some of the media buys happening on traditional media. And then I saw some of the digital starting to emerge and people like buying early days of programmatic ad buying. Fast forward, you started to see social media emerges.
Mm-hmm.
The iPhone and smartphones start to come into play. Mobile responsive web, and everything becomes mobile first. So it's really kind of a convergence of those kind of what I call forcing functions is really what I gravitated towards. I hate to say the phrase, but it's really kind of my nature is more early adopter than a lagger. So I lean into curiosity around what's new, what's coming, and make what I can out of it. But candidly, it's really the early days of what we now call cross-channel or omni-channel engagement. No one was talking about data being a thread through all of it at that time. You're trying to buy a billboard on Main Street. You're trying to hit a male demographic on ESPN, and you're trying to buy an ad and run an event. No one was connecting those tissues yet. It was emerging. That's kind of how I came into it.
That's so funny. I was living in London at the time and had some friends who were in the traditional advertising space, and had a friend who was joining a small digital first agency, and them trying to get even like 1% of the budget to be put onto online for buying, whether it was banners or more of the iteration one of digital online advertising, all came down to, but we can show you the data. They might have a distribution and have a rough idea, but we can drill down specifically to the types of sites and the types of places that we're putting our ads. And it just showed that having the information to back up why what you're doing is different is so impactful. And it was that data-driven approach that actually helped them to grow larger and larger because they could show tangible results. And so I'm curious, is that something when we look at data that you're seeing is still a driver in today's world in the stuff that you're doing, or is data now forgotten?
Well, just to kind of touch on what you were just talking about, it used to be how many people drove down Main Street at certain times of the day or for that month. So let's say you buy a 14 by 48 traditional print billboard on Main Street, and you had 12,000 cars that drove by, but you didn't know if it was a 20-year-old male or a 48-year-old female. You didn't know if they had, what kind of salary or car they were driving. You just were saying, oh, I had this many cars drive past my billboard. Now we're at open and click-through rates and IP addresses and device IDs and time on page and heat mapping on web experiences and you name it, right? We can measure down to the minute detail. So data is everything. I mean, data is by far everything. We can talk further about that, but what I have said some years ago, and I still believe in this, they used to say data is the currency. And I really believe that data is not the currency. Data is everything. Data is critical. Data is kind of the metadata, the details of the data, but it's trust and trust relationship that's critical. So if you think about engaging with a brand, the data that's going to drive those personalization across channels and that sort of thing is critical. But if you feel like you've been kind of like taken, you don't care how personalized something is. So having that trust relationship is really kind of where we've come to. One last thing around measuring eyeballs and opens and clicks and time on page and kind of IP addresses and who's watching what when, even down to the Netflixes and Amazons, you're starting to see accounts and who's watching what when. So it's not just the device ID, but it's this person in that household who's watching this content. It's that granular. So if you think about that, we kind of have to start to think about how is that going to be measured and what's the value of that if people start to feel like there's a trust lost. So there is kind of this human, technology push-pull that we're seeing in the market.
And I think it's also interesting where the more information we provide, the more willing we are for that level of personalization. And I'm just wondering, in your guess, how long is it going to be before we get to like a Minority Report type of a world where the ads change in real time based on the person who's walking past the sign to the level of personalization in an outdoor environment?
Well, I think we're there. I mean, we're seeing open real-time kind of content development in prototype. We are seeing some of that Minority Report. And I think those things that we don't think we're going to see anytime soon are probably already in development, and we're going to see them around the corner. One of the things I noticed around this kind of CRM, this broader CRM, customer relationship management umbrella, that's becoming a bigger umbrella around a lot of different categories of influence or categories of engagement, such as commerce or marketing or customer service. And when you start to think about that, it's not just about kind of content in the real time for marketing, but it's also about all the other touch points someone might have. So if there's a customer service case, this is a really easy way to explain it to when I speak to customers about it. And someone has a problem with your brand and there's a customer service, you want to suppress that communication before you market to them. You want to resolve it. Also think about it when you maybe see some advertising that's being pushed to you because it is being done in real time based on the data. Hey, I know exactly who John or Mike are, and Mike's searching for a hotel in Hawaii for a trip for his family. But let's say you take that trip. Let's say you went on a trip and you come back and you're still seeing ads for hotels. So there's personalization that's gone awry. In fact, what if you had a great experience or a bad experience and they're still trying to sell you advertising? They're still spending advertising to sell you. One, they're bruising their brand. Two, they're spending money on someone who's already converted. Three, they should be upselling you for your next trip. There's a lot of things going awry. So that kind of personalization about data, whether it's in real time or not, I think there's some low-hanging fruit that we can think about solving, but the real-time stuff is already coming. I mean, we're seeing some of that early stage already.
So I want to go and just ask you about some of the lessons that you've learned. So we've all had tough moments in life, and it really ends up shaping how we lead. Would you say that there's ever been a hard-won lesson on your journey that has completely changed how you approach digital transformation or what you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I've seen around digital business transformation is there is a sense that, and I kind of felt like this early on, you kind of have to have everything in place before you can really start to take that on. It's really the opposite of what you should be doing. Like giving everything in your house in order before you can start to move forward with some kind of transformational experience is really the opposite. What you really should be doing is thinking about the stakeholders and the principles of what you're trying to achieve and where you're headed. And one of the things that I've noticed, I think about lessons learned, I'm now, we might talk a bit about AI here, but one of the things that I'm starting to really kind of come to terms with in the space we're in, we have to rethink everything. I mean, the linear journey, the orchestrated funnel, leveraging data to do personal, like, yeah, that's all great, but some of those founding principles are still there. But I do think we have to rethink everything. We have to rethink roles, skills, responsibilities. One of the things that I've recently been hyper focused on, Mike, is that we have something around like a kind of a data orchestration. So when a individual is trying to engage with a brand, product, or service, or an audience is considering engaging with a brand, product, or service, they go through an experience. They go through searching, researching, engaging, and they might be an anonymous prospective customer. But eventually they become known. They download a white paper, they fill out a form, they go to an event, they become a known, what we call first party engaged individual. So instead of just being a broad unknown, they become unknown to very much a first party owned customer data. And then that experience starts to become more one-to-one. We can email Mike and or John and we can do customer service because Mike is happy or not happy, and we can upsell and cross-sell, and we can actually understand kind of behaviors of audiences, but also down to the very individual level. But what I'm seeing is we're seeing a convergence, and I almost call it a strategic inflection point. I think we saw this accelerated during COVID, work from home, things like right to be forgotten and first party data and signal loss. And I would even say like security and privacy played into that. So it accelerated during COVID for a number of reasons, as well as some regulations, but also because of behavior, human behavior, expectations. What I'm seeing now is you have different stakeholders and team members doing different activities. Even if you're a smaller organization, 200 employees, 2,000 employees, even up to enterprise global 200,000 employees. If you have disparate teams working on front end, back end experiences, whether it's brand awareness or first party data engagement, whether it's doing digital data identity and data enrichment, or if you're doing customer service or sales, all of these different entities used to be able to work kind of in these pockets, and then you hope you can kind of come across each other in governance. So I'm really developing something that I'm referring to as the data flywheel. The data flywheel is really becoming a forcing function where everything sits around this data flywheel. The principles are still there, but it becomes a forcing function for these teams to coalesce around a single source of truth, a unified profile, unified data set, but also a governance of how they're moving their business forward. It's really powerful when you think about those mid-sized companies who are looking to kind of understand their early learnings of a startup in their growth in the new world of agentic and data.
Something you and I were both exposed to is the speed of a startup with the scale of an enterprise. And you mentioned governance, which is a term that you and I have both experienced on many occasions. Would you say that there are fundamental items that a company needs to get right before they start looking at digital transformation, or before we get into the world of AI? Are there certain things that companies need to have their books in order, so to speak, before they start exploring pushing the envelope on what's possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, like, be careful of like getting everything right. And we used to talk about, data being so critical. And we found that companies that wanted to get all their data hygiene and all their data coalesced and organized, they actually fell behind. Those companies that had their data in a good enough place would move forward cautiously, knowing that they had to kind of constantly move forward with data hygiene. So you think about transformation, I would almost take that same approach. We're actually seeing some successes around this where those companies that think about where they're at today and where they want to go, we almost think about imagining the future and a future state, say 2 months or 2 years from now, depending on how you want to look at it. But what does that future state look like? Where do I want to go? Where do we want to go? But what I would say is bring some tactical kind of, thinking behind that. So one of the things that I would say is use cases. Try to figure out where your use cases, or what we often refer to as value pools. Where are the value pools? What are the use cases? And start to bring those up to the surface. We'll start to see them in pockets of your business of a specific use case that you think are high, and you start to measure the level of effort to deliver on those value pools that are going to drive your business forward. And also, not just the level of effort, but the return on the investment. The other thing I would say is, I think in the intro, you mentioned a lot of the service design work. So in my early days, between kind of the creative marketing and advertising background and moving heavily into the technology space, I spent the first half of my career heavily in the Adobe stack, quite honestly, in the creative suite. And I hate to say how early of days, but I literally cut my teeth on very, very early stage Adobe. The last 15 years or so in the Salesforce stack. And between those two worlds of creative and kind of the world I'm in now, around kind of omni-channel, engagement and leveraging AI, I spent a deliberate amount of time around customer journey mapping and experience design and leveraging like principles of design thinking to unpack complexity. And where I'm going with this is I came across this principle of service design years ago. And it kind of was an aha moment for me. And the reason why I say that is I was really into user experience, like how big is the button on the screen, and mobile responsive web. And we were developing mobile apps and social media engagement and mobile responsive and cross-channel. So it was really about the user interface and user experience and taxonomies and interaction design and information architecture. But I was so interested in kind of the top level customer experience, how that person, that individual, their journey. I was ignoring what we call the backstage. Who are the employees and what tools and capabilities do they have? How much friction and swivel chairing are they having to do at their job to serve up these incredible experiences we're hoping to give to our customer at their journey? And the way service design works and service blueprinting is really about understanding that top level customer layer, that customer service, but they call it the front stage. And then understanding the backstage, which is the employee experience, and then connecting those two and finding the holes in a service blueprint, finding the holes between the bottom service layer of the employee experience and the tools and capabilities they have so they can serve up. So I bring the service blueprint and service design thinking on your question around transformation, what to think about. Just to reiterate, think about the specific use cases and value pools across your business, and start thinking about kind of that blueprinting about what are you doing for the customer at that customer experience journey layer, and then what are the employees doing to serve that optimal experience up. That'll really help to kind of get that 30,000 foot view, and then you can drill into it.
So that's really insightful. Is there anything that you see people doing within this world of digital business transformation and the front, did you call it front office, or was it front stage and back
On
stage?
stage, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is there anything that you see people doing over and over again that just drives you crazy?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is people think it's done. So I always get a kick out of when someone posts or writes or big press release about their new website or the new mobile app. No one cares. No one cares. They just expect you to have a great experience. So this notion of we're going to do this transformation and then we can start running our business. When I first came across this notion of never being done, and I shared it with some senior leaders, they kind of were aghast. What do you mean? No, you're never going to be done. And that can be taken however you want to in your business, whether it's a simple web design or mobile app launch, or whether it's a new product or service you're launching. If you think you're going to be done with transformation, you're not really understanding the foundational kind of the DNA of what transformation is about. It's kind of always being kind of aware of what the market conditions are. So the first thing that comes to mind is just this notion of preparing it as if it's a project that has a start, like a beginning, middle, and end. When I think about people seemingly, I don't know if they get it wrong, but I think they have a little bit of a different perspective than what I would do around that.
That's fair enough. So looking at AI and future of business, with your role in being on the AI task force, you have a front row seat to the evolution and really what's happening in the marketplace. What would you say is the biggest game changer that AI is bringing to customer experience right now?
Everything. I mean, we are in an AI arms race. And I don't just mean like at the NVIDIA microchip level. I mean, it's there too. Not just at the data layer, at the hyperscaler, AWS, Google, et cetera layer. It's there too. And not just at the LLM layer. I don't know how many apps you or others are using, but like it's fairly commonplace that people know what ChatGPT is. I think I just heard 400 million daily users. But many have Perplexity, Gemini, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, the list goes on. And we're seeing adoption at the individual level pretty high. I think at the business level, there's cautious optimism. There's excitement, and they see the vision. But I would just say around the experience piece, I think the individual adoption's fairly high. There's very few that I work in. Certainly, I'm not thinking globally, but I mean, I would just ask, if you walk down the street, how many people are Googling things today that 2 years ago they Googled and now they're just ChatGPTing it or whatever, right? I think there's behavioral shifts happening. You think about like experience and what AI is doing. Human beings didn't have a phone. Now everybody has a smartphone. So behavior just changed. Just look around, just go to the airport, go to the store, right? And we're seeing that at a really accelerated pace. And one of the ways to explain that is how often do you Google things versus just look it up? And when I say look it up, I mean saying like Perplexity, GPT, Microsoft Copilot, et cetera, Gemini. You see these capabilities, and it might be simply, hey, I've got these 6 items in my refrigerator. What should I make for dinner tonight? Give me 3 recipes, right? Or it might be in the medical field, and it might be a pancreatic cancer researcher who's saying, I want you to do deep research on this particular case, and I want you to use this kind of insights from these kind of, you're seeing it from all ends of the spectrum, of the simple like Google search around recipes to high intensity, deep research fields. So I think just around the experience, I'm just seeing the adoption at the individual level growing, and that's gonna move to the org level and enterprise level.
I fully agree with you. And I think it is forcing shifts in how businesses are run. Like you said, you used to Google things. Well, Google's model is you search and there's advertising that's presented to you, and you go to a website and there's advertising that's presented to you. And I feel like the user experience of the websites is overwhelming these days because of the amount of ads that are being placed on the pages, because the viewership has gone down. Therefore, in order to keep the revenue, there almost seems like there's a doubling of ads. And we talked about perplexity. Well, in my view, perplexity is more of an answers engine, which happens to use a variety of LLMs as its engine that you can interchange based on what you're looking to search for. Do you think that the web experience will fundamentally shift if we're not using it as it was first intended, or do you think the traditional web pages that are being displayed right now will keep using advertising as is and just ride this out?
It's for sure going to change. As behaviors change, companies, businesses will want to find their audiences wherever they are and however they behave. And in fact, going back to kind of that service blueprinting, you're asking about customer experiences. AI is a big thing, right? It's like machine learning and predictive, where some say that we're in the third stage or fourth stage, depending on which metric of AI. We saw predictive and machine learning and that sort of thing. And, Gen AI came, we're now in agentic, right? But what I found interesting is it gets complicated quick when you start to open up these conversations around LLMs and, microchips and NVIDIAs. And so I started to really understand what are the underpinnings here? And you just touched on it. Where will people go? How will these businesses, whether it's Google or others, find them? What kind of mechanism, like a business model, revenue model around advertising? One of the things I'm seeing is there's a couple big areas where I think AI is taking us. One is, where can agentic AI find efficiencies for that employee? And then if there's efficiencies gained in that employee experience, how can that serve up a better experience for the customers they serve? Well, let's pause on that a moment. So let's think about someone who manages customer loyalty as an employee. We need to understand their domain expertise, their role, what kind of mundane, repetitive tasks they do. And then if you think about the customer who might have a VIP status within a brand and their loyalty, so what's the better experience that person can now provide that individual because of AI and agentic? So I bring that up because those are two things we're seeing: efficiencies and experiences. So increased efficiencies, improve experiences. Now, when you have that, and agents are running some of those tasks, you're freeing up time of the human, of the individual human being who has that domain expertise in that role. And if you're freeing up that time because agentic's doing it, they're now going to be more creative and they're going to be more innovative in their role and bring more to the table. Now that's going to change their behavior and the customer. So ultimately, where that experience is going to go is going to be the path to least resistance, where people find enjoyment. And that's where advertisers are going to go. Now, I will end by saying, I think we're going to start to see advertising in the ChatGPT experience, in the Copilot experience. Some of the things you're seeing in Gemini, I think we're just going to see some advertising in those spaces.
Hasn't Amazon introduced where if you're watching a show, you can almost in real time click on what people are wearing, or if someone's driving a specific car, you can look for more information inside of the video?
Mike, I love you brought this up. I love it. So during NFL season, Thursday Night Football, Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon and you buy things on Amazon, I buy a new pair of shoes, gets delivered. I also happen to be watching Thursday Night Football on Amazon. And now they know that I bought a pair of shoes. They know that they weren't $20 shoes, they were $200 shoes. They know they were men's, not women's. They know that I bought them from the West Coast, not the East Coast. They know a lot about me because of my purchase. They also can manage my profile. Oh, this individual's watching Thursday Night Football. And to your point, yes, they were testing, and I actually did some research on this. Geico ad would pop up, and there would be a little overlay on Amazon showing a click. If you took your remote, you could click on it. Now, depending on who owns your Amazon account, if you're in a family of four and one of your head of household owns the Amazon account, if I click on that ad for that pair of running shoes or that insurance, that ad will send an email to the account holder. So if your 18-year-old daughter's watching a show, they might get an ad but the email might be sent to mom who owns the account. So there is an interesting kind of challenge there. But it's so interesting you brought this up. I brought this up in the last few months since I was doing some research on it, because it is one of the most powerful closed loop ecosystems we're seeing in the market right now. They kind of own the entire end to end at that point.
I'm curious in your thoughts as we push more towards the digital experience and websites and every single thing we click on producing more and more information on us. Do you think there'll ever come a time where we almost go in the opposite direction, where we go back to the fundamentals of turning off the TV, turning off the phone, and getting away and spending time with people face to face, going to more of those traditional ways of, not having TV on or not having screen time on the weekends, not consuming social media because of how overwhelming it is? Do you think as the American culture, there will be ever a time where people say enough is enough and switch off? Or do you think it's going to be an always on for everyone all the time?
I don't have, I'm not Nostradamus. I don't have a crystal ball. I've been wrong before. So when social media came out, I was like, this is fantastic. It's going to kind of crowdsourcing your personality. You're only going to you're going to try to be your personal self and be kind because you're out in the public square. We saw the worst of humanity and the best of humanity on social. I think you're already seeing things come out over the last 10 years. And even if you go to Silicon Valley, a lot of the senior leaders that brought some of the capabilities, they didn't have their kids using devices. I mean, they were fairly public about that. And Tristan Harris and others talk about this. And there's many detractors from the tech sector that used to work in it and now kind of are speaking out very loudly. I think you're also seeing some concern around not just data and data privacy, which I think you're alluding to, but AI and agentic. So we have, I'm being very careful here. I think we have a challenge in front of us. And I think we have a challenge in that who's going to manage the AI if the AI is managing itself? Now that sounds silly, but I happen to live in an area where Waymo autonomous vehicles are all over the place now. So I see them in my neighborhood. I see them driving past each other. So if you have multiple autonomous agents, think about that in a business, think about that in your mobile experience or your web experience. If autonomous agents are communicating, we have to be very careful of that. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself and kind of dive into areas that I'm not best versed in. But I think there's a lot of real serious thought leaders having very much concern around that. You're seeing some of those things being talked about governing the amount of chips and GPUs people can have to process. I think that is kind of the Oppenheimer moment we have to be very careful of. In fact, I've actually recently, I can't remember who said it, but basically was asking some of the senior AI leaders who are running some of the largest companies that we're all familiar with, which one of you think you will become the Oppenheimer of your time? And I think that's a very real question. So I think we have to be careful. I'm saddened when you see, 4 people who are friends at a table and no one's talking, they're all on their phones. I do think the pendulum swings. So let me just say that. I do think the pendulum swings.
I would agree. And hopefully they're all texting one another at the table and not texting someone else. I think what you just said, which is critical, is, humans like other humans. And I think that's where the pendulum is swinging to. And that's what I meant by people disconnecting and just getting away from it, is getting back to the fundamentals of trust. And I think that the yearning that people have right now to be around the people they trust, the brands they trust, the experience they trust in a world where there's a lot of artificial and a lot of automation and things that don't feel personal is going to be critical. And I think if someone can find a way of blending the two, but increasing trust while creating a better experience, is going to be the organization that will truly win, because I think fundamentally that's what we're all searching and yearning for. And I just don't know how we achieve that. But I'm wondering on your thoughts, is that something that resonates with you?
Yeah, I mean, some of the business side of this, Mike, is about some of the things we touched on, like how do you leverage data to provide more personalization? And now on the personalization side, a lot of companies can deliver personalization. Very few can deliver real-time omni-channel personalization at scale. So when we think about the business side of it, yeah, data, AI, accelerating efficiencies, providing more personalized experiences, meeting someone in the moment, anticipating their needs. Yeah, that's all fantastic. I don't want to see an ad for a $200,000 Maserati if I can't afford it. Send me an ad for a vehicle that I'm looking at, right? So we do like those personalized experiences. So on the business side of it, I think we're still going to drive towards that very personal experience. And it comes down to it's a value exchange. So what value does that business have for me as a consumer, as a prospect or a customer? What value are they giving to me that I feel comfortable giving them my time, my data, my email address, potentially my credit card, my physical address? So that is kind of that value exchange, or sometimes we'll call it a consent relationship. I consent my information to the company because I value in what I'm going to get in return. So that's the business side of it. I think that's very true. I do think, and I start to get a little philosophical here, I find in my own behavior, the noise, the chaos, the future that we're living in. I jokingly was talking about kind of how I got into this space, and I saw in my life just the pace of change just growing. If you go back in time, agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, and even the kind of the computer revolution from like the 50s, these big mainframes the size of a house, right? Down to the personal, those took centuries or decades. So the human experience could adopt and adapt over time. And I think when I hear about psychologists, some of the folks that I follow around AI and disruption and kind of the human condition, what I think they're talking about, and I find in my own life and my own family and my close friends and family and colleagues, is it's the pace of change. Agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, even in the last 50, 70, 100 years, it's taken either centuries or decades. Now, what used to take 5 years is taking a year. What used to take a year is taking a month. What took a month is now a day. Every morning we're waking up with a new model, a new capability. I think everybody's seeing now as we're recording this in March of 25. I mean, voice AI, I'm seeing some powerful capabilities. Just speak to it. Why will we need phones or laptops or tablets if there's just a device on my person that I can speak to and it can communicate back to me? So there is something here about the human experience. What I found was it was very disruptive for the human experience. Really powerful to see things here, and you're seeing this with Meta and some of the Apple, some of the virtual experiences. The big problem that I've had with kind of those wearables like that is exactly what you're touching on. It's disrupting this human experience. I think if you went back in the 60s and 70s and said, yeah, COVID's going to happen and everybody's going to do remote, it's going to be like Star Trek where I think people thought we were crazy. So this is comfortable, right, where we can talk over screen, but it's still human. So I think we're gonna always gravitate towards that. That's very primal, by the way. It's very primal, the human condition.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that human, just meeting face to face and sitting down, I think is fundamental. And just one last question for you. So you've accomplished a lot in your career. And at this point, what would you say keeps you excited and motivated?
Well, I think as I've 30 plus years in the space and the convergence of kind of really just at the crosshairs of digital disruption, really my whole life, I think I'm finding now that balance is key. And I kind of find some excitement in that. And the word that I do a lot of meditation, going back to how do you find calm in the chaos? I meditate, and meditation can be a lot of different things for a lot of different people, whether that's physical exercise or taking a walk or going up on a mountain and humming. So I think finding that peace, I use the word equanimity now. That's kind of a word I'm adopting about equanimity and just finding balance and finding peace. But what's interesting and where do I find kind of like my excitement is kind of knowing that I can ground in that balance. And I have kind of a genuine curiosity. So I mentioned briefly, I hate like talking about like these buzzwords, but being an early adopter, I never called myself that, but I just kind of realized that's who I am. So my nature is to be comfortable with kind of the uncomfortable, be comfortable with change. And in fact, if you're in the CIO space, I would say change is the constant. Change is something change is the trend, really, quite honestly. It's less about data and AI and kind of it changes the trend. So right now, Mike, I think it's curiosity. My curiosity keeps me driving. I almost have a childlike approach to business problem solving. So I try to take kind of some of the things I was just sharing around my experience, how I got here, what I've been doing, both in the creative and technology space, but also in transformation, leveraging the capabilities and tools, data and AI. Now, of course, I'm driving a lot of it, but try to bring kind of some of my balance to that and my curiosity. And the last piece I would say, sometimes I think of life as just really about learning and teaching. So I wish someone, when I was in my 20s, kind of coming out of college, trying to figure things out, I wish someone would come to me. So I mentor quite a few younger folks, and I really enjoy that. Just having candid one-on-ones, sharing some thinking, asking what they're thinking, what they're challenged by, just being a good listener, but a genuine curiosity and seeing where this is going.
Well, John, those are such wise words, and I really appreciate you jumping on today's podcast. Thank you for sharing your insights, and I really appreciate having you on.
Fantastic, Mike. Thanks for the time.